Nobody screamed louder than she did when the order crackled through her earpiece. Retreat. Leave the sniper. She's done. In the frost-covered desert on Christmas Eve, the sniper lay motionless on the sand ridge, blood frozen on her gloves, scope cracked from shrapnel. Her team pulled back. The helicopter turned away. Only cold wind remained, shattered Christmas bells echoing in memory. And one Navy SEAL who'd been taught from day one, survive, no matter what. Chief Petty Officer Katherine Hayes pressed her eye against the scope, watching heat signatures dance through the green-tinted display. Her breath came in controlled intervals, shallow, measured, silent. Each exhale turned to vapor in the freezing desert air, dissipating like ghosts into the darkness. 42 degrees Fahrenheit, dropping fast. The ridge beneath her was cold enough to burn through her tactical gear. Sand and frost mixed into something that shouldn't exist, a cruel joke from a desert that had killed more men through hypothermia than heat stroke. People thought deserts were hot. Those people had never spent Christmas in the mountains of northern Iraq. Overwatch? Status? The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Bradley Morrison, team leader, currently 300 meters below with the assault element. Clear. No movement. Wind picking up from the northeast, gusting to 15. Katherine shifted her weight fractionally, scanning the compound through thermal imaging. Still don't like it. Static crackled. Copy that. Standing by. The target compound sat in a valley like a wound in the earth. Mud brick walls, corrugated metal roofs, 3 structures forming a U-shape around a central courtyard. Intelligence said a high-value target was celebrating inside. A warlord who'd orchestrated attacks on 3 forward operating bases in the past month. Christmas present for the brass. Katherine didn't believe it. 12 years as a SEAL had taught her to trust her gut more than satellite imagery. And her gut said this whole operation felt wrong. The compound was too quiet. No guards visible, no thermal signatures moving inside, no vehicles except one ancient Toyota that hadn't moved in 6 hours. Morrison, recommend we abort. Katherine kept her voice level. Compound's cold, could be abandoned. Negative, intel's solid, we're greenlit. Katherine's jaw tightened. Intel was rarely solid. Intel was office workers in air-conditioned rooms looking at drone footage and making educated guesses. She was the one freezing her ass off on this ridge, the one who'd see the trap spring before anyone else. Through her earpiece, she heard someone humming. Petty Officer First Class Trevor Walsh, the team's breacher, couldn't help himself. Silent Night in a barely audible whisper. Walsh, shut it, Morrison said. But there was no real anger in it. Christmas. Katherine had forgotten what day it was until the chaplain mentioned it during the pre-mission brief. Christmas Eve in a frozen desert, hunting a ghost. David and Lily would be decorating the tree back in Virginia Beach. Lily was 6 now. Last video call, she'd made her mother promise to be home for Christmas. Soon, baby girl. Soon. She'd lied. She was good at that. All elements, stand by for my mark. Morrison's voice cut through the frequency. Overwatch, confirm clear. Katherine did one more sweep. Thermal, night vision, standard optics, nothing. The compound remained dark and still as a tomb. Confirmed, you're clear. Execute, execute, execute. The assault team moved like water, flowing down the slope in 2-man elements, weapons up, spacing perfect. Katherine tracked them through her scope, covering angles, watching for threats that might emerge from darkness. They reached the outer wall. Stacked up. Walsh placed the breaching charge on the gate. That's when Katherine saw it. Movement. Not in the compound. Behind it. Thermal bloom in the rocks, 300 meters east. Then another. And another. Morrison, abort, I've got. The explosion cut her off. Not from Walsh's charge. From inside the compound. The center structure erupted outward in a ball of flame and shrapnel, the blast wave visible as it rippled through the cold air. Secondary charges followed. The entire compound became a kill box, walls collapsing inward, fire reaching toward the sky like clawed fingers. Katherine's scope filled with chaos. Her team scattered, diving for cover, but there was no cover. The compound had been one giant IED, and they'd walked straight into it. Contact east! Contact east! Morrison's voice, strained but controlled. Heavy weapons fire! The thermal blooms Katherine had spotted came alive. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness. A PKM machine gun opened up, tracers arcing across the valley like deadly Christmas lights, then RPGs, the distinctive whoosh crack, as rockets screamed through the air. Katherine was already returning fire. Center mass on the PKM gunner. Squeeze. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The thermal signature dropped. Another shooter. Squeeze. Drop. But there were too many. The ambush had been planned perfectly. Her team was pinned in the open, and the enemy held high ground on 3 sides. Overwatch. We need suppression on the eastern ridge. Morrison was moving his men, dragging wounded, returning fire. We're pulling back to grid. An explosion drowned out his words. Close. Too close to Katherine's position. The ridge shuddered. Katherine felt it before she heard it, the deep crump of a mortar round, impacting 60 meters to her left. Dirt and rocks geysered into the air. They'd spotted her. I'm compromised, Katherine transmitted, already shifting position. Taking mortar fire. Another round. Closer. 40 meters. They were walking it in, adjusting fire. In 15 seconds, they'd have her exact position. Katherine low-crawled backward, dragging her rifle, moving toward the reverse slope. Her knees scraped over frozen sand and rock. The cold bit through her gloves. Third round. 20 meters. The blast wave slapped her back, filling her mouth with dust and copper taste. She rolled left, came up in a crouch, sprinted 5 steps, dove. The 4th round hit where she'd been lying 3 seconds ago. The world became pressure and light and noise. Katherine felt herself lifted, suspended, thrown. She had time to think, this is how it ends. Then she hit the ground and everything went red. Pain arrived in waves. First, her left leg. Sharp, grinding, wrong. Bone fragments clicking together like dice in a cup. Second, her back. Impact trauma. Felt like she'd been hit with a sledgehammer made of ice. Third, her ears. High-pitched whine. No, multiple whines. Different frequencies, all screaming. Katherine blinked. Her vision swam, doubled, slowly resolved. She was on her back, staring at stars that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Her rifle was gone. Scope shattered somewhere in the blast. She could smell burning plastic and copper and her own blood. Move. She had to move. Her hand found her sidearm Sig Sauer P-226, still holstered. Good. Her left hand scrabbled for the medical pouch on her vest. Fingers numb. Everything numb except the leg, which burned like someone had driven a railroad spike through the femur. She tried sitting up. Mistake. The world tilted sideways, and she tasted bile. Her left leg bent at an angle that shouldn't exist, just above the knee. Compound fracture. She could see the pale gleam of bone through torn fabric and flesh. Overwatch. Sightrep. Morrison's voice in her earpiece. Distant, tinny. Or maybe that was the ringing in Katherine's ears. Katherine tried to speak. Coughed instead. Copper taste flooded her mouth. She spit blood and tried again. Hit. Her voice sounded wrong. Too quiet. Legs broken. Lost the rifle. Static. Then, can you move? Katherine looked at her leg. At the blood pooling beneath it, already starting to freeze in the cold. At the white bone jutting through muscle. Negative. More static. Gunfire in the background. Someone screaming. Not in pain, in rage. Walsh probably, laying down cover fire. Hold position. We're coming for you. But Morrison's voice carried something else. Something Katherine recognized because she'd heard it before. In Fallujah. In Marja. In a dozen other hellholes where good men made impossible choices. Doubt. Katherine pulled her medical kit free. Her hands shook, shock setting in, or maybe just the cold. Probably both. She found the tourniquet, a bright orange cat that looked obscene against the dark desert floor. Applying it one-handed was going to hurt. She positioned it high on her thigh, above the break. Took a breath. Pulled it tight. The pain obliterated thought. Her vision tunneled, edged with black. She heard herself make a sound, not quite a scream, more like a wounded animal's keen. Her fingers fumbled with the windlass, twisting, until the bleeding slowed to a seep. Good. That was good. Her training took over. Assess, adapt, act. Assess. Compound fracture left leg. Probable internal bleeding. Moderate to severe blood loss. Combat. Ineffective but mobile with support. Adapt. No support coming. Enemy between her and her team, mortars still falling, sporadic now, searching. Act. Survive. Katherine dragged herself backward, using her elbows and her good leg. Each movement sent lightning through her shattered femur. She bit down on her glove to keep from screaming. Crawled 3 meters, 5, 10. The reverse slope offered minimal cover, a depression in the earth where wind and erosion had carved out a shallow basin. She rolled into it, gasping, vision graying at the edges. Through her earpiece, Morrison's voice, "All elements, fall back to extract point Alpha. We have 3 wounded, multiple casualties enemy side. Overwatch." He paused. Katherine heard the calculation happening in that silence. Heard the math being done, the brutal arithmetic of combat. How many men to send back for 1 wounded sniper? Through enemy fire? Up a ridge taking mortar rounds? The answer, 0. Overwatch. Can you make it to the rally point? Katherine looked down at her leg, at the tourniquet, already soaked through with blood. At the distance, she'd have to cover 300 meters of open ground, all of it visible to enemy positions. She could lie, tell him yes, buy herself time, force him to wait. But Katherine had been making the hard calls for 12 years. She knew what had to happen. Negative, can't walk, ridge is still taking fire. Another pause, longer this time. She heard Morrison breathing, heard the weight of command crushing down on him. Kate. He used her first name. That told her everything. "We can't extract you. Too many wounded. Enemies repositioning. If we don't leave now." "I know." Her voice came out steady, calmer than she felt. "Make the call, Brad. Get them out." "God damn it. It's the right call. You know it is." Static. Gunfire. An RPG detonating somewhere in the valley. The sounds of her team fighting their way to safety. "We'll come back. As soon as we regroup, we'll..." "No. You won't. Not tonight." Katherine kept her voice firm, professional, because if she let emotion in, she'd break, and breaking meant dying. "Enemy owns this valley now. You come back, you lose more people." "Kate. Get them out, Morrison. That's an order from your Overwatch." She wasn't his superior. They both knew that. But the words gave him permission to do what he already knew he had to do. "Copy." Morrison's voice went flat. Command voice, compartmentalizing. "Overwatch, you are authorized to evade. We will coordinate extraction when situation permits." Translation, "You're on your own. Good luck surviving." Understood. Overwatch going dark. Katherine pulled the earpiece out before she could hear their helicopter leave, before she could hear the rotors fade into distance, taking her team to safety and leaving her in this frozen desert to die. Silence filled the void. Not true, silence. Wind still howled, mortars still fell in the valley, sporadic gunfire rattled, but the voices were gone, the connection severed. She was alone. The shock of that realization hit harder than the mortar blast. For 12 years, she'd never been truly alone. Always a team, always backup, always someone watching her 6. Even in the worst firefights, even when everything went to hell, there'd been voices in her ear. Now, nothing. Katherine lay in her depression, staring at stars she couldn't name, and felt the cold begin to work its way into her bones. The tourniquet had stopped the major bleeding, but she was still losing blood. Shock was setting in properly. Now she could feel it in her extremities, in the numbness spreading from her fingertips. She had maybe 2 hours before hypothermia became irreversible. Less if she couldn't get warm. Her survival kit contained 1 space blanket, 1 chemical heat pack, protein bars that would be frozen solid, water in a canteen that might already be ice, and a first aid kit she'd already depleted. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But Katherine had graduated Bud.S, had survived Hell Week, had completed SEAL training when less than 20% of candidates made it through. She'd operated in Kandahar, in Ramadi, in places that didn't have names on any map. She'd survived everything the Navy could throw at her. This desert wouldn't be what killed her. First, stop the bleeding. The tourniquet was temporary, a stopgap. She needed to actually address the wound. Katherine pulled out her first aid kit, hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Her fingers felt like sausages, too thick, too clumsy. The compound fracture meant bone had pierced skin. Infection risk was catastrophic. In a hospital, she'd need surgery, plates, pins, months of recovery. Here, she had 1 roll of gauze, 1 roll of medical tape, and morphine she couldn't take because it would cloud her judgment. Katherine packed the wound as best she could, stuffing gauze into places that made her vision white out. The pain was transcendent, beyond anything she'd experienced. Each touch of the gauze sent electricity through her entire body. She worked methodically, the way her training demanded, pack the wound, wrap it, secure it. The gauze turned red immediately, soaking through, but she kept wrapping until the bleeding reduced to a seep. Good enough. It had to be good enough. Next, warmth. Katherine pulled the space blanket from her kit, unfolded it with shaking hands. The metallic material crinkled like candy wrapper, obscenely loud in the desert silence. She wrapped it around herself, tucked it in, activated the chemical heat pack, and pressed it against her core. The heat pack would last maybe 6 hours. Then she'd be on her own. She ate a protein bar, forcing down food that tasted like cardboard and cold. Her body needed calories, needed fuel to fight the shock and cold. She chewed mechanically, swallowed, chased it with water from her canteen. The water was slushy but not frozen. Small victory. Now, security. Katherine pulled her sidearm, checked the magazine. 15 rounds. Not enough for a firefight, but enough to make noise, to signal if her team came back, or to ensure she didn't get captured. The Taliban didn't take female prisoners. They made examples. Katherine pushed that thought away. Think about now. Think about the next hour. Don't think about what happens if the sun comes up and she's still here. She lay in her depression, wrapped in her space blanket, and listened to the desert. The gunfire had stopped. Her team had extracted, and the enemy had stopped pursuing. The valley had gone quiet except for wind and the occasional crackle of fires still burning in the compound ruins. How long until they came looking for her? The enemy knew there'd been an overwatch position. They'd walked mortars right onto her ridge. They'd find her eventually, maybe not tonight, but at dawn, when they could search safely. Katherine needed to move. But moving meant exposing herself, meant crossing open ground on one leg, meant leaving a blood trail in the frost. Staying meant hoping her team could mount a rescue before the enemy found her. Both options were bad. She chose the one that kept her alive longest. Stay, conserve energy, wait for extraction window. But she didn't believe extraction was coming. She'd heard Morrison's voice, heard the finality in it. They wouldn't risk more men for one wounded sniper who couldn't walk. The math was brutal, but clear. Hours crawled past. Katherine drifted in and out of consciousness, jerking awake whenever the pain spiked or the cold became unbearable. She activated a second heat pack when the first died, rationed her water, ate another protein bar. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to her suffering. She found Orion, found the North Star, oriented herself. If she had to move, she knew which direction to go. East, away from the ambush site, toward the desert interior where terrain offered more cover. She'd crawl if she had to. 300 meters a night, resting during day, living off her emergency rations and whatever water she could find. People had survived worse. There were stories SEALs who'd evaded capture for days, who'd walked out of hellholes with nothing but their training and will to live. Katherine would be one of those stories, or she'd die trying. Around 3 in the morning, she heard it. Helicopter rotors. Distant, growing closer. Her heart hammered. Extraction? Impossible. Morrison couldn't have gotten approval this fast, couldn't have scrambled another bird. Couldn't have. The rotors passed overhead. Not stopping. Not searching. Just crossing the valley, heading somewhere else. Not for her. Katherine bit down on her glove to keep from screaming. The hope had been worse than the pain, worse than the cold. For 30 seconds, she'd believed rescue was coming. Now the rotors faded, and she was alone again. She wanted to cry, wanted to rage at the universe, at the mission planners who'd sent them into an obvious trap, at the intelligence analysts who'd assured them the compound was occupied. But tears would freeze on her face, and rage burned calories she couldn't spare. So Katherine lay still and breathed and survived. As dawn approached, the temperature dropped further. Katherine's thermometer read 38 degrees. The space blanket helped, but she could feel hypothermia creeping in. Her thoughts were getting sluggish. Her shivering had stopped, which was actually worse than shivering. She forced herself to exercise, tensed and relaxed her muscles, flexed her good leg, kept blood moving. The sky lightened from black to gray to pale blue. With sunrise came new danger. She'd be visible from the valley, visible to anyone searching the ridges. Katherine assessed her options. The depression gave her maybe 3 feet of cover, enough to hide from casual observation but not from a deliberate search. She could hear vehicles now, engines in the valley, the enemy, moving in, searching the battlefield. They'd find her by noon. Katherine checked her sidearm. 15 rounds. She could make noise, try to signal friendly forces, or she could save the last round. She pushed that thought away. Not yet. Not while she could still fight. The morning wore on. The sun climbed higher, offering warmth but also exposure. Katherine's leg had gone numb, which terrified her more than the pain. Numbness meant nerve damage, meant she might lose the leg even if she survived. But she couldn't think about that, could only think about the next hour, the next minute. Around 1100, she heard voices. Arabic, multiple speakers, getting closer. Katherine pulled her sidearm, chambered around as quietly as possible. Her hands shook from cold or fear. She couldn't tell anymore. The voices grew louder. 3 men, maybe 4. Searching the ridge, systematically. She had maybe 2 minutes before they found her. Katherine took slow breaths, centering herself. She wouldn't go down easy, would take at least 1 with her, maybe 2 if she was lucky. But 15 rounds against 4 men, when she could barely move? The math was bad. The voices were 50 meters away now. 40. She could hear boots scuffing on rock, equipment jingling. 30 meters. Katherine aimed her sidearm at the lip of her depression, waiting for the first face to appear. 20 meters. Her finger took slack out of the trigger. First round accuracy would be critical. 10 meters. This was it. Her last firefight. She'd make it count. 5 meters. Helicopter rotors. Sudden and loud and close. The voices stopped, shouting now, alarmed, confused. Katherine risked looking up. An MH-60 Black Hawk, flying fast and low, door gunners visible, American markings. The helicopter didn't land. Couldn't land on the ridge. But it made a pass, and the door gunner opened up, laying down suppressive fire that sent the enemy fighters scattering. A voice over loudspeaker, amplified and distorted. Katherine Hayes, this is Rescue 1. Stay put, we're coming. They came back. Her team came back. Katherine didn't cry, couldn't afford to, not yet, but something broke loose in her chest. Some tension she'd been holding since the moment Morrison had ordered retreat. The helicopter made another pass, keeping the enemy pinned. Then a second helicopter appeared, this one equipped for extraction. It hovered over her position, and a rope dropped. A pararescue jumper came down, fast roping onto the ridge. He hit the ground, assessed her in 3 seconds. Chief Hayes? I'm Sergeant Reeves. We're getting you out. About damn time, Katherine managed. Her voice cracked. Reeves smiled. Sorry for the delay. Paperwork, you know. He worked fast, securing her in a rescue harness, splinting her leg properly, administering morphine now that she didn't need to stay alert. The morphine hit like a wave, washing away the pain, leaving only profound exhaustion. They lifted her. Katherine rose from the ridge, dangling beneath the helicopter, and watched the desert fall away. The compound, the valley, the depression that had nearly become her grave. All of it shrinking, becoming insignificant. Inside the helicopter, Morrison was waiting. His face was haggard, eyes red. You came back, Katherine said, words slurring from morphine. Told you we would? You said. I lied. I'm good at that. Morrison's voice broke. Had to make command believe extraction was impossible. Had to file the paperwork, get approval for a rescue op, convince them you were still alive. Took you long enough. 14 hours. Fastest I've ever pushed a mission through. Katherine closed her eyes. 14 hours. She'd survived 14 hours in a frozen desert with a compound fracture and no support. Hell Week was longer, she whispered. Morrison laughed, sharp and bitter. Yeah, it was. The helicopter banked, heading toward the forward operating base. Katherine let herself drift, suspended between the agony of her leg and the blessing of morphine. She'd survived. Against all odds, against all logic, she'd survived. Because that's what SEALs did. They refused to quit. 3 months later, Katherine stood in a Navy hospital room in Bethesda, Maryland, watching snow fall outside. Her left leg was encased in a brace, metal pins and titanium plates holding together bone that had been shattered. The doctors said she'd walk again, but the limp would be permanent. Small victories. Physical therapy was brutal. Worse than Bud's. Worse than any deployment. Every day, she forced her leg to bend, to bear weight, to remember how to function. Every day, the pain reminded her of that frozen ridge, but she could walk. That was something. David visited every day, brought Lily when school allowed. Her daughter had grown, seemed taller, more serious. The deployment had changed things. Katherine had missed 6 months of her life, had almost missed everything. "Mommy, does it hurt?" Lily asked, watching Katherine walk with the brace. "A little. But I'm getting stronger every day." "Like a superhero?" Katherine smiled. "Like someone who refuses to stay down." David said nothing, but his expression spoke volumes. He'd been military himself, understood the cost, understood what it meant that she'd been left behind, that she'd survived anyway. That night, after Lily was asleep, they talked. "What now?" David asked. "You've got medical retirement waiting, full benefits, you could be done." "Could be, but you're not going to be." Katherine looked at her leg, at the brace that would never fully come off. "I can't go back to operations, can't do the physical stuff anymore. So, maybe I teach. Pass on what I learned, make sure the next generation knows how to survive when everything goes wrong." "You think they'll listen?" "They will. Because I'm living proof that survival isn't about perfect conditions. It's about refusing to quit when conditions are impossible." David considered that. "You going to tell them about the ridge? About Morrison leaving you?" "I'm going to tell them that hard calls save lives. That Morrison made the right decision, and then he made it right by coming back. Leadership isn't about never making mistakes, it's about fixing them." 6 months after the extraction, Katherine stood in front of a class of SEAL candidates at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Young faces, eager eyes, convinced of their own invincibility. She'd been them once. "The desert doesn't care about your training," she told them, leaning on her cane. "It doesn't care about your ego or your skills. It only cares if you quit." "What if quitting means staying alive?" one candidate asked. Katherine thought about Morrison's decision, about the 14 hours she'd spent alone. "Then, you make a choice, and you live with it. But understand some choices you can't unmake, some things you can't take back. The mission requires hard calls, impossible calls, and the people who make them carry that weight forever." She paused. "But the thing about impossible calls, sometimes you can make them right again. Morrison left me on that ridge because staying meant losing his whole team. Then he spent 14 hours moving heaven and earth to get approval for extraction. Both decisions were right. That's what good leadership looks like." The candidates nodded, not really understanding. They would, eventually. Everyone did. At home, Katherine became what David called aggressively determined. She coached Lily's basketball team sitting on the bench with her cane, shouting plays. She planted a garden that mostly thrived, her limited mobility forcing her to plan carefully. She wrote training manuals for the Navy, distilling 12 years of experience into lessons future generations could learn from. She had nightmares, bad ones. The desert, the cold, the sound of the helicopter leaving. She'd wake up gasping, convinced she was still on that ridge. David would hold her until she remembered where she was. "You're home," he'd whisper. "You're safe. You're home." And slowly, month by month, she started to believe it. 1 year after the extraction, Katherine stood on a beach in Virginia, watching Lily chase waves. Her daughter had grown, 7 now, taller, more confident. The separation had changed her too, made her understand that her mother's job meant risk and sacrifice. "Mom, come in the water." "In a minute, baby." The ocean was gray-green, cold even in summer. Gulls cried overhead. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds. Katherine's leg ached. It always did when the weather changed. The doctors said she'd need additional surgeries, eventually. All that metal and trauma catching up, but not yet, not for years. David appeared beside her, carrying sandwiches. "You okay?" "Yeah, you say that a lot." "Because it's usually true." He studied her face with the expertise of 15 years of marriage. "What are you thinking about?" "Morrison called yesterday. Offered me a position." "What kind of position?" "Training coordinator. Stateside. No deployments. Just teaching the next generation how to survive." "Would you take it?" Katherine watched Lily, fearless, running into the surf. "I already did. Started next month." "That was fast." "Life's too short to hesitate." Katherine smiled. "That desert taught me something. You can retreat from a battlefield, but you can't retreat from who you are." "And who are you?" "Someone who refuses to quit. Someone who teaches others to do the same." Lily shrieked as a wave caught her. She tumbled, came up laughing, soaked and happy. Katherine thought about the desert, the cold, the certainty she was going to die alone, and then the sound of rotors. The impossible rescue, coming home. "They came back for me," she said quietly. Morrison made the math work somehow. Changed the equation. He's a good leader. He's a good man who made a bad call and then fixed it. David nodded. "Sounds like someone I know." Katherine glanced at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you spent 12 years making impossible choices. Now you get to choose something that doesn't involve frozen deserts and broken legs." "My leg's not broken anymore." "Mostly." The doctor said. "I know what he said." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Lily play. The sun broke through clouds, turning the water silver. Katherine's leg throbbed, pins grinding as she shifted weight. She ignored it. Pain was just information. It told her she was alive. "Mom," Lily called. "Come on, the water's perfect." Katherine kicked off her shoes, left her cane propped against a rock. Her leg protested, metal and bone grinding. She moved forward anyway. "Race, you?" she called back. Lily squealed and took off running. Katherine followed, slower, limping, but moving forward. Always forward. Because that's what SEALs did. They survived. And they taught the next generation to survive too. She'd spent 14 hours in a frozen desert learning that lesson. Now she had the rest of her life to pass it on. The water was cold when she reached it, cold enough to take her breath away. But Lily was there, laughing, splashing, alive, and happy. Katherine waded deeper, legs screaming protests she ignored. Some pain was worth bearing. Some battles were worth fighting. And some lessons could only be learned when you refused to quit, even when quitting made perfect sense. The desert had tried to kill her. Her own team had left her behind. But Katherine Hayes had learned something fundamental in those frozen hours. Survival wasn't about perfect conditions or perfect choices. It was about making the next right decision, then the next, then the next. One breath at a time, one step at a time, moving forward, always forward, until you reached the water and found your daughter waiting. That was survival. That was victory. That was everything.